This podcast is brought to you by the Startup Core Podcast and by the Arate Podcast Pantheon. The Final Frontier Podcast. These are the voyages of Jake Boger and Justin Spur. Our weekly mission to explore memories of Star Trek's strange new worlds, to recall the search for new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has had the spare time to go before.
I fucking love this episode. I cannot stress that enough. I had a great time.
It was so much fun.
It was genuinely very good.
It was so much fun. I'm watching it and I'm like, this is why I love Star Trek, because this is something that these super straight-laced characters are acting like fools, but they're doing it so straight. It's simultaneously hilarious, and this episode does a great job of raising the stakes. And there's tension the whole time, and you're like, this is the fourth episode that ever aired on television, and yet it's like it might all end right here.
It does suffer from a little bit of, like, you can tell who the main characters are by who gets it the worst, but but it's TV. A television show. Yeah. So I'm like, obviously Sulu isn't gonna die like that. That much I gather, or he's not gonna run some poor red shirt through with his rapier. Like, that's probably not gonna happen.
Well, we keep in mind though, we've only seen Sulu like 3 times up to this point.
True.
So upon first viewing, just about everybody's fair game except for like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, especially as Scotty. Scotty's wearing that. He's new. Yeah, we'll talk about Scotty. I was very happy with Scotty.
Yeah. So like I said, welcome to the Final Frontier. If you haven't figured it out by now, we are, of course, talking about Season 1, Episode 5, The Naked Time. I'm curious about the inflection of this title. Should it be The Naked Time or The Naked Time?
That's interesting. I don't know.
The title really makes zero sense. Unless I'm missing something.
because we'll get to the ending later, but there's a certain, I don't want to give the ending away, but we talked about it last week. I asked you if this episode involved time travel, and you said no.
I forgot that it did. I legitimately forgot that it did. I did. I forgot all about this element. So
I don't want to give away the ending. I don't want to give away the ending yet, but when we get there, I do have an accusation to levy against you.
No, I misremembered. That being said, again, not to spoil it, I think this is my favorite episode ending thus far.
I completely agree. I think this is my favorite episode so far. I really liked the kid, and I really liked his stupid face. But that episode was so much fun. But like, there's some standout performances in this, and we're gonna get to them individually. Like Leonard Nimoy in particular.
Oh, I've got some juicy facts about that scene. But of course, this episode takes place approximately, because as you noted, we travel back in time technically, but it takes place roughly stardate 1704.2, which is, oh god, I forgot. You do see Sulu's chronometer running backwards, but I had mentioned in the last episode, I believe, the episode of Third Rock from the Sun, where they go to the sci-fi convention.
Oh, yes.
And I forget, when Sulu's going on his rant, he's like, you try to branch out as an actor, you do, whatever, O'Neill, but all they want is horse laden captain. But then another time he was like, he's addressing like a crowd of fans, and he was like, my chronometer's running backwards. And I'm like, that's a reference to this episode, which is a very a very standout episode for George Takei as Mr. Sulu.
Absolutely. But I want to note before we jump into this, my note on Paramount Plus's episode description, which is just, so this episode is essentially about the dangers of space drugs.
Technically,
which we find out exists in this episode. I was very pleased to hear that the Star Trek future contains drugs still.
It absolutely does.
I mean, who doesn't want the occasional space drugs? That's just recreationally. It's, your own business. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Fun fact too, we are now in a new year for the crew of the Enterprise because this episode takes place in the year 2266. We have been in 2265. However, if you recall, during the events of Charlie X, it was around Earth Thanksgiving time, so North American Thanksgiving time. So it is a new year, and nobody cared. Nobody celebrated. Nobody gave two shits. Because now we can travel back in time, so time matters not. They're all going to become Dr. Manhattan. Spoiler alert. But the original air date of this episode was September 29th, 1966. Written by John D.F. Black and directed by Mark Daniels. And I will say, I kind of thanks, and I meant to send you this video and I completely forgot. There's a channel on YouTube that shows you the CGI differences in each episode on Paramount Plus. Yeah, it's crystal clear. A lot of the space shots are new. However, some are integrated more. A lot of the planetary and orbiting shots are new, but they look amazing.
Well, I was gonna say that was one of my notes. Was there's a shot of the planet. Any of these shots, like they look CGI. So if they look CGI, I'm going for it, assuming they are. Yeah. But I was like, it could be a model because some of those, like last episode, there was those background environment. You said were hand painted. So I'm like, there's a chance that this is a model and it's really good looking. But so anytime I see stuff that looks CGI, I automatically am gonna I'm just gonna ask.
Yeah, my note is that a lot of the space shots are at least augmented with CGI. Like the planet was replaced, particularly in the man trap. Because looking at it now, I'm like, wow, that was obviously not from the 60s. But I think they kind of some of the model shots are enhanced. I'm not going to say they're outright replaced. But it's integrated quite seamlessly. It's not as obvious as the purple space cloud.
No, that was pretty obvious. Yeah.
But this adventure begins with the Enterprise arrives at dying planet Psi 2000. Their mission is to observe and document the planet's breakup and to retrieve a research team stationed down on the planet's surface. Mr. Spock and Lieutenant Junior Grade Joe Tormelin beam down and find the researchers' life support system shut down and the team frozen to death, one fully clothed in a shower.
Okay, so that was supposed to be fake ice, right? Because I did have a question about the fake ice.
Oh, we're gonna get to the fake ice, but one was seated at the control console as if nothing was wrong, and one they found Spock noticed had been strangled. What do you got on the fake ice?
I was just gonna ask, what's it made of? Because I couldn't tell.
Actually, this is great because my first thought was this is the 60s. Was this all asbestos?
That's what it kind of. Well, I was thinking. I don't know what it's called. Which is why I didn't specifically name it. But the shit you spray out of fire extinguishers.
That's exactly what it was.
Okay, because it looks just like that. Yeah,
that is exactly what it was. It's the dry. It's from dry powder fire extinguishers.
Oh, okay. Because they absolutely look like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. They just went in there and went to town. And while we're talking about what's it made of, what do you think their bio suits were made of?
I had a question about the suits. I have a couple questions about the suits, which is it's supposed to be cold where they are, right? Like freezing cold.
Yes.
So there's just a lot of open space for cold air to get in. It doesn't seem like it's keeping them very warm.
It's one of those things.
He just at one point opens it up and touches himself.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's okay, I'll suspend my disbelief and say it's sealed, maybe because they take a wetsuit for example, it's flexible and blah blah blah. But when he reaches his hand up into his mask, I'm like, no, he'd be dead.
Well, my favorite. I mean, I have a note which is Spock's advice not to touch anything comes immediately after the guy gets shit on his hand and then immediately touches his face. It just makes me think of when me and Jordan talked about Alien, we got a comment that was first thing to learn in an Alien movie, don't touch shit in space. That's what this reminded me of. Dude, you're on a planet. Why would you immediately touch yourself? It's weird advice coming way too late.
So one of my notes is, why would you take your glove off on an alien planet and then touch your face? Taking your glove off is bad enough.
It's one thing, but touching his face.
This is Science 101 on Earth. It applies 10 times more in outer space.
Right?
And then I also
Absolutely.
and I also had written a lot of if this episode has a flaw, there's a lot of things that happen in this episode just because the script needs them to happen.
A little bit, I will say a little. I will to go real back to the outfits. I will say their texture was odd to me. Like I keep fixating on clothes. I don't know why, but just like the texture of these whatever the heck kind of suits they were supposed to be were very strange to me.
They were shower curtains.
Okay. Now that you said that, that makes total sense because the pattern on them was so. It looked like a lot of this show, to my enjoyment, but maybe to its agedness, looks like a lot of like, hey, we found this in a closet 5 minutes ago, and it looks science fiction-y.
Well, and especially when you remember the fact that a lot of sci-fi conventions and cliches originate from the show. So,
for sure. I mean, this show is the reason why fan fiction exists.
It is. Yes. And the term Mary Sue. It is because of Star Trek.
It's the very first fan fiction is a Star Trek fan fiction. I don't know who it. I at one point knew the name of it, but I watched as real quick aside. I watched as a really good documentary that Tom Felton, the gentleman who plays Draco Malfoy, did about fans. And he sort of that went into history. That's where I kind of learned that Star Trek. But there's a really kind of interesting moment in that documentary where it's about him getting to know a woman who's a really big fan of his and her relationship to the franchise. And at one point, he meets a couple of fans who are dressed as Bellatrix, and he's playing with the wand. And he's like, "Oh, this is like right out of my childhood." And that moment kind of blew my mind because I was like, that has a completely different context to him, like a completely different meaning. And that was so fascinating. Just very good documentary. Very interesting.
To go down that rabbit hole. So the term Mary Sue is also from that exact same fan fiction because the girl that wrote it, I forget how old she was. I think she was 14 or 15. She wrote a fan fiction in which she is not only the object of affection for Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy, but at one point, she is placed in command of the ship by Captain Kirk because of her undeniable skill. Yes, at least in the story.
In the story, her name. Oh, I thought her real life name was Mary Sue.
I think it is. I think her real life name is Mary because she self-inserted herself into the fan fiction.
What must that? Man, I have so many questions about Mary Sue.
You know what? You know what we'll do? Get us to 1,000 subscribers. Okay. You, the fans. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll do a live dramatization. We'll get people from the podcast network. We'll do a special episode with a live dramatization of.
I've never read it. My fascination with it is just like, what must that feel like to have your name weaponized in modern times in such a negative fashion? And that must not feel good. I just can't believe the first fan fiction was from a woman. Like, just the notion that like just like in what year would that have been? Like 1970s, 1980s. A female, a woman would be like, I like Star Trek. Like, we've just kind of made women feel comfortable in space. At least I find like
Star Trek was quite popular with female viewers.
Was it
even in the 60s? Yeah.
See, this is me coming in this is why I'm glad we're doing the show, because for me, the cultural perception and zeitgeist of Star Trek has always been that it's a male-dominated, only men like this, nerdy guys who look like me. Like that's
absolutely not. There's a documentary Trekkies, which we will go over. There's going to be a season we do that's kind of like quirky and parody stuff, and we'll watch the documentary Trekkies. There are people that get married in Star Trek uniforms, and there's some. I'm just going to say it. There's girls that cosplay as Star Trek characters and characters other than Seven of Nine. But realistically, if you watch Star Trek Voyager, you're a Trekkie. Like, that's not a show that you find by accident. Yeah. And I mean, I hate to say it this way, but I'll just say it. They're not unattractive.
Fair. Okay, fair enough. Hey, look, man, I cannot. I'm sitting here in a Star Trek uniform talking about Star Trek. I live in 2 glass of the house to throw stones.
Who are we to talk? And I'll never, because the thing about it is, at least this is my perspective, Star Trek is sexy as a show. And what I mean by that is it's got all the fun of Star Wars, but it's also got the mental sophistication. Not to say that Star Wars is dumb, But Star Trek is a little bit more sophisticated. It is a little bit more closer to reality. It's still science fiction, but I mean, I know people are trying to invent a lightsaber, true, but think about all the inventions. We already talked about one. Think about all the inventions that exist in the world today because of Star Trek.
I used to my dad's a major Trekkie, and I used to be like, Dad, what's like the one thing modern technology that blows your mind? And he pulled out his smartphone and went, I used to watch this shit on Star Trek. That's but to tie it back to the episode.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is a data pad.
It is. It's Star Trek technology. I mean, Windows, but I was gonna say in terms of the show being sexy, this episode was way sexier than I was expecting.
It was in a couple of different ways.
Yeah, quite a bit more sexier than I was expecting.
But yeah, so the suits for shower curtains, which I got to kick out because at first I thought it was like it kind of looks bubble wrappy, but it's too colorful, so it's got to be something else.
It looked odd. Like the texture looked odd. I'm like, I don't. But to be fair, this is not the first time I've questioned safety equipment in the Star Trek universe.
I mean, to be fair, also, I've seen worse from newer shows. So
yeah, that's true. That is true. But again, I love like, to me, shit like the shower curtain safety equipment is what makes the shows like this timeless, where it's like they probably had like 5 minutes, they needed something, they were like, just make it happen.
So we already talked about how Tormund
just immediately touches his face.
Dude, you're an officer in Starfleet.
Yeah, well, is he not there as isn't he not there as Spock on a scientifically based expedition? Like,
yes,
yes, surely there has to be, but also his work. I mean, I imagine we will because I have a note about his insecurities, as it were. He has a particular set of insecurities, so him just touching his face does align with those insecurities, in my opinion. Like he doesn't really belong there, I guess would be my. Or at least he doesn't feel he belongs.
Yeah, he doesn't feel he belongs there. But
yeah.
So anyway, after all this happens, the landing party returns to the Enterprise and are examined by Dr. McCoy, who finds no medical issues and allows them to return to duty. And in this scene, we also get the first of many instances of casual racism from Dr. McCoy.
Yeah, I constantly notice the casual sexism, but there's a bit. I think I noticed the racism less because of how astonishingly multicultural that ship is. So like, I think I give it kind of a pass.
Well, and then so this is something that I often ponder too,
which is probably bad.
I mean, yes and no, and this kind of goes into it. So I often ponder, like, we can all agree that racism among human beings is stupid, but when you're talking about aliens, because like, and I think about this with fantasy too. So I'll use orcs as an example. Like, in many fantasy novels, orcs are, at least the way they're characterized, and please don't attack me in the comments, they're fictional. They don't exist. They're not real things. But they're basically, until very recently, like with the Warcraft movie, they're basically portrayed as pure evil.
Yeah, more or less. Well, yeah, Warcraft did kind of, in the Lord of the Rings context, yes. But if you're a big Warcraft guy, they are a nuanced race of creatures. But I do get your point.
Yeah. So we'll go Lord of the Rings orcs here.
Yeah.
They're pure evil. Evil. Okay, probably a better example because you guys just talked about this: the xenomorphs in Alien.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I can, to a point, I could probably, depending on the context, I could probably understand a little bit of xenophobia when it comes to alien species.
Sort of, yeah.
Not saying that the Vulcans should be...
Oh, you're referring to... I'm so sorry. Sorry, I just clicked. You're referring to his alien racism.
Yes, not...
Yes, oh, wait. Okay. I don't think...
Where was his human racism?
No, I thought you were saying that he was being racist to humans, and I was like, oh wait, was he? Did I miss that? Sorry, yeah, I completely forgot what you're... I didn't find that moment. Maybe that's it. I didn't find that moment to be racist. Maybe taking a crack at his green alien blood, but to me that just seemed like levity, like humor, like humor.
Yeah, and Spock gives it back all the time.
Absolutely.
So,
I
said, like that's why I said casual racism, because it's not like McCoy. But here's the thing, and this is why I do kind of sort of call it racism. It makes me wonder because much like we'll see in Star Trek Enterprise, Captain Archer does have some. At best, it's resentment towards the Vulcans as a race, as a society, and it kind of sticks. So I'm wondering, and even though he ends up having a better relationship with T'Pol, and the Vulcans as a whole, there does seem to be some lingering feelings there. So maybe McCoy's got, even though Spock, Spock's his friend, but they eventually get closer and closer as the, series goes on. But they do often butt heads, and one of the first things that they point out about each other is the differences between Vulcans and humans.
Assuming you call that green stuff in your veins blood.
The readings are perfectly normal for me, Doctor, thank you. And as for my anatomy being different from yours, I am delighted.
Here's what I will say. So this show takes place culturally in the real world. This show treats Spock as though he's a figure of respect, right?
Yes, very much so.
Speaking.
Yes.
So this show has the perception that alien species are worth respecting, at least in my opinion. That's how I see it. But if you go to like the 80s, and particularly, I bring him up as an example all the time, but Steven Spielberg's perception of aliens is kind of mind-blowing to me in the sense that he sees them as beings capable of interstellar travel. They can come here in a ship we can't even comprehend. So therefore, they must be vastly more intelligent than us. But yet, they can, in the case of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, can only communicate in what is ostensibly Morse code. Like fancy space Morse code. So clearly he thinks that they're dumb enough that they can't achieve basic but in Star Trek is like Spock is an alien, he speaks English, he can speak to us. But Steven Spielberg, his perception, so he has that human arrogance to assume that, they can't achieve something that we can. And I think that this show has an interesting perspective of, no, we would see each other as equals, right? Or another example I use is E.T., who comes here and we just treat him like he's a fucking house cat. like to me, that's the difference in perception of alien kind, where it's like it demonstrates a level of, in the case of Steven Spielberg, I would argue human arrogance that just doesn't exist here.
Yeah. I'm
forward thinking in that regard. Maybe Gene Roddenberry just was more forward thinking.
I would make the case for yes, because he was adamant about wanting it not only to be multicultural, multiracial, but also multi-species.
I was going to say, also, to be fair, Spock is the only alien on that ship, at least as of yet.
I think, as far as being a member of the crew, yes, and I think that's a budgetary thing. However, once you get to the animated series, because of the abilities of animation, you do get to see some more alien species. If I remember correctly, there's a cat woman.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. But I mean, even to be like, a Spock, you've slapped some ears on him. But even to be like, in my opinion, this is like we talked about last week, ESP, people who have ESP, and then we keep going to the Orville. But to be like, here's a race of people who are just psychic. They look like us. They look like us identically, but they're not. They're psychic. Then that way you can include another alien person to make it a more diverse.
And thankfully too, because it's one of the best things about Star Trek is just the variety of species that serve with a common goal. Once you get to Next Generation, right out of the gate, you've got Worf, who's a Klingon. You've got Deanna Troi,
Worf
who is
not Worf. What's the one? What's the one who always is giving Whoopi the business? I want to say Quark.
Quark's Ferengi from
Ferengi used to scare the crap out of me when I was kids.
I love the Ferengi. I love them. So much.
I remember when my dad used to watch Star Trek. They used to scare me so bad. Like they're freaky looking. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they used to scare me so bad.
It's some great prosthetics. But then you have Deanna Troi, who's a Betazoid, and then you get to Deep Space Nine. You learn about even in Next Generation, you get introduced to the Bajorans, who are basically humans just with a ridge on their nose. It's a very subtle difference.
They must be what the Solarians are referencing. That's my thing with makeup wise. I'm constantly trying to be like, what is this a reference to?
Maybe there's some slight differences. Makeup wise, yeah, probably. It's very similar to the Bajorans, but I love the Bajorans as which they really dig into it in Deep Space Nine. But the Bajorans as a group of characters and as a culture is very interesting. But I digress. We're still on the original series.
Yeah.
We have ground to cover. But so anyway, while having lunch, Tourmaline begins to act irrationally, expressing hostility towards other crew members and threatening Lieutenant Sulu and Riley with a knife before turning it on himself. This is also the first time we ever see a food replicator in Star Trek.
I'm really frothing at the mouth for my first red shirt death. So I once again, is this our first red shirt? No, it wasn't our first red shirt. I was disappointed. And then fine, I said that looks like a fun medical bed, the one where they've got them, and then just flip them. Well, that just looks useful. We should get more of that. And
Very
then
much so.
we're talking about the guy with the knife. I said the guy needs to compartmentalize better.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I noticed that as they're struggling, nobody gets up to help. Not a soul. No. It's a room full of people, and nobody gets up to help.
We talked about Space Madness, where he brings up where McCoy brings up Space Madness.
Yeah, which I imagine that's just a thing.
What is exactly Space Madness? Is it similar to like Ship Madness or?
Yeah, I would think so. I actually, yeah, and I would actually think that would be not necessarily common, but it wouldn't be super rare because I mean, think about it. You're in the middle of deep space. That's gonna mess with you. That's gonna mess with you a bit.
That's why I understood. That's why and I don't imagine it exists yet. But that was the thinking of the holodeck was to keep people from going insane.
And it's one of the things that I think they touch on in Deep Space Nine is they talk about how, like, since you're on a space station, while it is remote, there is a planet right there. So
yeah.
It can help you from getting so stir crazy.
We talked about they have drugs in the Star Trek future already, which I appreciated. Did I see 3D checkers this episode? Did we already talk about 3D checkers?
I learned that in Charlie X. I'd never noticed it before. I think we did see it in the background again, but it was when Spock was playing 3D chess with Charlie. I noticed the 3D checkers board, and I'm like, I never noticed that.
I didn't notice it that time. I noticed it this time that they're playing 3D checkers, and I'm like, I need to know how that affects things.
This doesn't seem like a very. I mean, 3D chess I kind of get because it adds another element.
What does 3D checkers do? That's my thing.
I don't know. Now I want to know, but
right. And then Sulu comes back, which my note of previous episodes, not enough Sulu. Perfect amount of Sulu in this episode. I wanted to bring up the fact that he mentions how Sulu is trying to get him in the botany lab.
Last week it was botany he was trying to get me interested in.
Last week he was all about. He tried to get me into botany last week. So to answer the question of what happened to the botany lab, Sulu's just over it.
He did. Oh man, that's hilarious. I didn't even put two. Yeah, so Sulu's just jumped hobbies.
Yeah, he's jumped hobbies now. He's over the botany lab. And then obviously I've got Sulu is the star of the show.
It's like, I tried botany, but the thing about plants is they're so boring.
Yeah, he's into this week. This week he's into fencing. That's what he's into this week. And then now that we're on the scene with the butter knife, I just said he's gonna stab him real good with that butter knife.
Yeah, he sure is. The wound is not life-threatening, but in sickbay he dies after a successful surgery to McCoy's bewilderment.
Yeah.
The only thought I had is as they're doing the surgery, I'm like, I know it's the 23rd century, but shouldn't they still be wearing surgical masks if there's an open wound?
You would think, he died from butter knife stabbing.
Yeah, that would be a real. Well, but McCoy does point out it's like it wasn't that much damage. He shouldn't have died, but as we know, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not from the wound. It's because he lost his will to live.
I said the scene where he's threatening to kill himself. Is I said it's theoretically a tense scene. It is a tense scene, but for me it wasn't super tense but it became more tense retroactively because the character did end up dying. But I'm like, it's a butter knife. I don't find that threatening.
Yeah, I was gonna say if it hadn't been a butter knife, it would have been a lot. There would have been. But
it was in its construction and how it was filmed a tense scene. Like it was a lot of the scenes in this episode, and this was one of them. A lot of great acting from some guest stars. Like I've got some compliments for some guest stars coming up. Like there was some people showed up for this episode. They really did.
Well, Tormelin may have lost his will to live, but you definitely won't if you check out this sponsor.
As far back as I can remember, I have wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now, I am here to guide you through the intricate paths of building your business, embracing emerging technologies and navigating the startup world. I am Saul Tarazona, and this is Startup Corps, your go-to podcast for entrepreneurial insights and tech-driven success.
When we last left our heroes, Tormelin had just given himself surgery with a butter knife and died.
Oh yeah, I have a note here that just says, I definitely missed Bones last week.
his absence was felt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say, did we skip over the bit where Sulu invited the nice young men to go work out at the gym with him?
Not yet. We're going. Which, oh god, I laughed so hard. Both Sulu and Riley also begin to behave irrationally. Sulu runs about with a sword, like a swashbuckler from the Three Musketeers, while Riley reveals his Irish ancestry, locks himself in engineering section, and proclaims himself captain of the Enterprise. Also, repeatedly sings a disjointed version of the old ballad, I'll take you home again, Kathleen.
And now, crew, I will render Kathleen one more time.
So this is the bit where I laughed hysterically. It's what you're talking about. So first of all, this doesn't strike people as weird. Just seeing people do this and then start acting crazy. It's kind of what did Sheldon say in Big Bang Theory? It's like, yeah, and if they had figured out to kill the guy with the sniffles, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
If influenza was only contagious after symptoms appear, it would have died out thousands of years ago. Somewhere between tool using and cave painting, Homo habilis would have figured out to kill the guy with the runny nose.
Right? My thing with that bit is I guess because I know George Takei is famously gay, right? So I'm just like, was Sulu supposed to be like playing for both teams here? Like the fact that he's like, hey man, you want to come to the gym with me? Nice, handsome young man. But then what was weird is the guy comes back and Sulu doesn't. Like the guy comes back to the bridge, but Sulu doesn't. So I was just like, what happened to Sulu? Like he just seemed to disappear, and then it cuts to the guy wandering around the hallways or whatever. Which I've got the note. My guy is space stoned. And then the guy goes into the office, and the show really wants to remind you that he's straight, just so you're not confused. And then Sulu jumps in with his rapier. That's what happened to Sulu. Sulu he just pops back in half naked. You're like, oh my.
Yeah, but I did laugh when he was like, "Hey, what do you say we get out of here?" And I'm just, who doesn't notice?
Is Sulu making a move? Is he making a move?
It came across a little bit. I think that just might have been George's personality kind of leaking through a little bit. But I'm just over here. I'm like, how did no one notice him leave? The bridge is not that big. I think he may be the best actor, but then we're going to talk about Leonard Nimoy. But I just feel like George Takei, he could have had a bigger career post this. Like he's so charismatic that like he really is.
I don't know. He feels underserved by this material. To a little bit at least.
I had this,
not this material, not this episode. I mean generally, this episode is phenomenal.
Yeah, I'll put it to you this way: if so, like Star Trek series of today are all interconnected, and it's nothing to spin off. Strange New Worlds is both a spin off of Discovery and at the same time a callback to the original pilot. So if Star Trek was being made if the character Sulu existed in a Star Trek universe today the exact same way, I think it's a foregone conclusion that we would have gotten a series with Sulu as captain.
Well, isn't he? I mean, not to leap ahead the franchise, but doesn't he eventually become captain?
He does. He becomes captain of the Excelsior.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, he's got so. I don't want to say he has more charisma than Kirk does.
He's got a lot.
He's got a lot of charisma.
You know what though, and I will say this: I say he has about the same amount. It's just a little bit different. It's a little bit different. Yeah, it is,
but in a way that works for me.
I don't dislike it. I like it quite a bit.
I also thought when he popped back out and he was going, I thought for sure we were going to see our first red shirt death, and he was going to accidentally stab a red shirt. I was so positive.
We once again got a little bit of an implication that women in these command positions is still relatively new, because Riley says, "Yes, let the women work too."
Yeah. Oh, his thing, and the women shouldn't wear makeup, and I was like, oh, there's that 19. I think I said he's a man out of the 1950s. Yeah, love his weird 1950s attitude.
Well, it's like
I think that attitude would have been dated even in the 60s.
Oh no, I was like, wow, you find that on YouTube today.
Yeah, fair. I suppose that's true.
So Riley has his own like red pill hate channel.
Yeah.
And I don't like it when women wear too much makeup.
He's easily though. I said Kirk's exasperated eye rolls are amazing. And he has to listen to the song for the 100th time. But now easily my favorite guest star so far. Like just he was very funny.
He's funny.
Like I laughed so many times. It was very good.
But fun fact about Sulu's foil, rapier, whatever you would like to call it, he was originally supposed to have, well, one of the ideas is he was supposed to be carrying around a katana, or they say a samurai sword, but a katana.
Oh, but, yeah, that's why he wouldn't
and this is a tribute to everyone involved. The ultimate decision was left up to Takei from the episode's director. Takei reasoned, however, that by the 23rd century, these sort of, like, culture, I'm not going to say stereotype. What's the word I'm looking for? Like these cultural expectations.
I would have said stereotype, but fair, yeah.
Well, but so I'm going to say expectation.
Asian guys gotta have the katana.
Well, specifically Japanese because his name is Hikaru Sulu. So these sorts of cultural expectations would have been relatively a thing in the past. It's like it's not frowned upon to be proud of your cultural heritage, as we've seen. Uhura speaks many African languages. She's very much into that sort of area of her past, and then Riley himself is like he talks all the time about being Irish. Scotty's obviously proud about being from Scottish, this, that, and the other, but it's not necessarily expected. It's like the Japanese guy didn't have to have a Japanese sword, that kind of thing.
No, but also Sulu strikes me as a well-read character, if that makes any sense.
Very.
So he reads high-class books, so it makes sense to me that he'd be into fencing. Like it's just a character choice that makes sense to me for that character.
Sulu, yeah. Well, and actually, I remember watching an older interview with George Takei where he talked about. He said, "Well, when I was a kid, I didn't pretend I was a samurai. I pretended I was Robin Hood."
The man who wrote that script, John D.F. Black, happened to be visiting on the set about a month before we actually filmed that, and he told me that he was preparing this script where this virus invades members of the crew of the Enterprise through the palm of our hand, and it destroys all inhibitions, and we start acting out on our deep down hidden desires. And he said he was thinking of putting a samurai sword in Sulu's hand, and he goes around accosting everybody with a samurai sword. And I said, well, that's ethnically consistent because I'm of Japanese ancestry. But I said, Sulu is supposed to be a 23rd century guy. Now, I'm a 20th century Japanese American, and I didn't play samurai as a kid. And I said, if anything, after going to the movies and seeing Errol Flynn as Robin Hood, I came back home, had my mother make me a Robin Hood outfit. My backyard became Sherwood Forest, and I organized the neighborhood kids, and we had make-believe Robin Hood in my backyard, and I was Robin Hood.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And it's like, and if that's how it was growing up, in the 40s and 50s, I would imagine by the 23rd century, it would be very much the same. However, we take a few steps back in the 2009 film when Sulu is still into fencing, but his weapon of choice is a collapsible katana.
Oh, interesting. Oh, see, that's no fun. See, it would have been way more fun. I don't get though. I wouldn't have gotten that. I think that now retroactively, way more fun if he had just a rapier.
I agree.
That's a character choice I wish they had stuck with. I think it's fun.
Well, not to mention the way that katana unfolds, it would be basically useless because it would be hollow except for the tip.
True. Yeah, that's true.
So I'm like, this weapon is useless. However, a collapsible rapier might actually be plausible.
Yeah. Do they? No, I don't know if they exist. I know. Do they have the ones that just spring out? I'm pretty sure they do, but they're not lethal.
They have collapsible batons, for example. I mean, I would think. Yeah. But yeah, just give the man a rapier.
I love how it's a sword that's sharp though. Because I
have a note on that actually, because fencing foils are blunted at the tip.
Yeah. They're not sharp.
But there's a moment that alludes to the fact that Sulu has de-blunted it because Kirk goes to move it away and then feels the point and
he's like, "Ow, sharp!" Yeah,
he's like, "It should," because he even goes open because you should. Fun fact: I used to fence. So I
learned it once in high school.
So I used to fence epee competitively. I was not. Well, officially, I fenced epee, which was a mistake. But I wanted to be able to hit the whole body because I fight dirty. but unofficially, I was champion of double saber fencing. I was okay at saber, but for some reason, if I had two, I was good. Huh. I don't know what it is, but I can vouch a foil would be blunted because we learned to use them all, and then we picked which one we liked better to actually compete in. But yeah, like I said, Kirk goes to like flat point move it, and then realizes it's sharp and goes, "Oh, shit."
Yeah. That's what made me go, "Oh, I thought maybe he was gonna like in his drugged out brain, like skewer a red shirt." Sure, we were going to see a red shirt dinosaur.
However, it's worth noting, even though they are blunted, they are still dangerous because I'll name drop you because dude was a badass when this happened. Competition, gentleman by the last name of Rasmussen, took an epee into his arm, and it went in probably about 3 inches, I would guess, 2 to 3 inches.
Wow.
It was gnarly. And I mean, he didn't have a choice. He kind of had to grin and bear it.
Yeah,
and then He stood there with it in for a while because they weren't sure if he should pull it out or try to cut it out. Like put a local on it and then cut it out and then stitch it up. But they were like debating for a while, and then finally I think they elected to cut it just to be safe because they weren't sure how deep it went into the muscle. So they figured, I don't know, but I mean, he just stood there, and I mean, it was hurting. You could tell it was hurting. But Rasmussen, you're a beast. Man. You are a champion. Anyway, everybody who's acting erratically, whoever touches their skin also starts showing erratic symptoms, and the infection quickly spreads to the crew. As they abandon their posts, the ship's orbit destabilizes and falls into the planet's erratic gravity well. As the Enterprise enters the upper atmosphere, the hull begins to heat. This is the part that I really started getting in, because at first it was kind of fun, and then when this started happening, I was like, oh, I actually feel the tension, and this is good. This is really
definitely good. It's the high. I think it's the highest stakes the show's been so far. Certainly.
Yeah, most definitely. This is also the first episode when Spock subdues Sulu. It's the first time we see the Vulcan nerve pinch.
Oh, is it? I must have missed that. Dang it.
Yeah. And then Spock is sassy in this one. Did you hear his D'Artagnan joke?
No, I missed it.
Take D'Artagnan here to sickbay.
I actually had to rewind it and make sure Spock said it and Kirk didn't say it because it was very jarring for Spock to be sarcastic. And I'm like, Spock's a little sassy for somebody who's not supposed to have any emotion.
But did he say that after he? Interesting.
After he nerf pinched him, and he goes, "Take D'Artagnan here to sickbay," and I'm just like,
so is it possible? That's interesting because I have a note. Because obviously, I have a note about what happens to Spock next. Did he pick it up when he pinched Sulu?
See, it's implied that he doesn't, but I'm kind of thinking, considering how
touching. I was gonna say he's touching Sulu's naked, sweaty chest.
It's implied that he gets it from Nurse Chapel. However, as quickly as it seems to set in, I think he probably did get it from Sulu.
That's what I'm saying.
That's my headcanon anyway.
Because it seems to imply that it happens way, but he sort of barely seems to touch her. That's why.
Well, not only that,
it didn't occur to me that he would have got it from Sulu. I thought he got it from the nurse, but now that you're saying that, I'm like, maybe he got it from Sulu.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it's kind of not a mistake, but I think it's something they didn't really think too much of in the teleplay of it all, because the scene very heavily implies that Spock gets it from Nurse Chapel, but it happens instantaneously, and it hasn't happened that quickly with anyone. So it would make sense, and it kind of happens with Kirk too, because they imply that he gets it from Spock. But again, it happens instantaneously, whereas it makes more sense that they would have both contracted it from Sulu.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah.
But yeah, so Spock, I mean, I laughed at the joke, but I was like, that seems, I think that would have been more appropriate coming from Kirk. But like you said, maybe it was early onset. I don't know. And the other note I had is, I get that the ship is heating up, but surely a starship is capable of entering a planet's atmosphere.
Well, I mean, I could see maybe the argument for the gravity affecting it.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe it's the speed, and maybe it's going too fast because of the sudden shifts in gravity.
Yeah, like there's a major, like you said, major shift in gravity.
this is really cool. So that handheld device that Spock is using to figure out the time they have before planetary impact, that's an actual E6B flight computer, which pilots still use today, but that's what they would have used in like the Second World War to figure out all those stuff. It's a manual instrument, and I just thought that was really cool that they included it and didn't just say, cool. "Oh, he's looking at a computer." But like they said, the note I said is pilots still use them today, and I always like the fact, like it's like sailors still use a sextant today, or at least some do, and it's like
certain tools that are like timeless and how effective they are.
Well, and it's kind of like, hey, people still use rulers. They're a thing.
I mean, people still use compasses. Like,
yeah, exactly. So I always like
now because of all the stuff.
Well, but I always enjoy seeing the inventions that stood the test of time, even in futuristic settings, because it's like, hey, if you don't have a computer, you can still calculate. And I like that.
Right.
Chief Engineer Scott regains control of engineering from Riley, but Riley has shut down the engines. It will be impossible to restart them by normal procedures before the Enterprise burns up in the planet's atmosphere. While this is happening, Spock becomes infected when Nurse Chapel takes his hand and confesses her love for him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a note that says all the ladies want Spock.
I have a note that says, why do all the chicks like Spock?
Yeah, I want to say, apparently the ladies just want Spock is specifically what I wrote.
But I actually have an answer to this question. I figured it out after I had written my outline. It's because he's aloof. It's because he's not chasing any
I
of them.
was just going to say, it's that stoicism.
That's
ladies
what it
dig
is.
the stoicism.
Yep, it's not just the stoicism, although don't get me wrong. It's the fact that he's not chasing any of them because he's not interested.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, apparently he is interested. He's not interested.
So I now want to make a short. Have you seen that Chad Riz filter going around on TikTok?
No.
I kind of want to put it on Spock now. I'm going to put it on Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and see. Bet you Spock will have the most frizz with the Chad chin.
Hey, look, it's demonstratable. I thought Kirk was the one getting all the ladies. That's the cultural perception, but no, it's Spock. Spock's getting all the ladies.
Well, that's the irony, because if Spock were trying, he would be getting more than Kirk.
That scene's so good, though. I mean, it goes on, in my opinion, for like a hair too long. But like just like him like being conflicted while the bridge keeps calling. Different people from the bridge keep calling him. Is so good. It's such a good scene.
So, because we're going to dig into that a little bit more, but one thing I do like to mention this episode illustrates perfectly is the professionalism of the entire crew, because they are literally careening to their deaths. And yes, Uhura's trying to get a hold of people, but it's procedural. It's not descended into chaos. Everybody's doing their job. And it's like, again, this is one of the things that doesn't get touched on as much in Star Trek, but the professionalism of the crew at virtually every turn is just
right. Well, I like how
it's fiction, right? But at the same time,
I enjoyed the moment later where Kirk freaks out at oh man, I have so much trouble remembering her name, but the yeoman, the blonde woman, he just like yells at her and then immediately is like, "I'm sorry."
Oh no, that's Uhura.
My bad.
Yeah.
Oh, it was Uhura he yelled at.
He's like. Could you turn it off? She's like, don't you think that if I could, I would? And they both have this moment. They're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That wasn't cool. I'm stressed. That's my bad. And I appreciated that.
But hey, for 1966.
Yeah, he would have like in any other context, he would have been okay for him to tell her to shut up, and she would for that's pretty forward thinking for the time. It absolutely is. Yeah,
that's good. That's good for 2024.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. Yeah.
So you better believe it's normal in 2266.
But the moment immediately after the scene with him and with Spock and the nurse, where he's trying to stay strong and he breaks and he cries for a moment and he goes back to being strong again. Damn, that's good acting. Like that's just good acting.
So that was originally supposed to be a comedy bit, and Leonard Nimoy was like, "No, I want to do something different."
Good. R.I.P. to the goat, man. He's got good instincts. Like that was not powerful maybe, but like effective. Very.
No,
effective.
It was powerful, and there's a couple of fun facts. So that was all one take.
No way.
Well, if you notice, it's a long shot. I think they cut back to it, but the scene where he's actually breaking down, that's all one long shot where the camera moves in.
Incredible.
And it was improvised by Leonard Nimoy because that scene was not in the script.
Because the one where the post one where he's freaking out by himself, that was all improvised.
When he goes into the room by himself.
And he's doing that big long monologue about how he has to have control or whatever, and he's alone.
Yeah, and then he starts.
That was all improvised.
That was
Holy shit!
But that's why it doesn't cut, because the scene was never blocked. It was an improvisation by Leonard Nimoy.
My note for that scene is just damn Leonard Nimoy.
Another fun fact. Apparently, after this episode aired, Leonard Nimoy's fan mail increased exponentially, particularly with female viewers.
I can see that, yeah. Do the Emmys exist at this point?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure.
Because like Emmy, give that man an Emmy. Like it's good. It really is. It's legit good.
Also, just a kind of a side fact. I don't know if this is right because have we seen Nurse Chapel before?
No.
We haven't. I thought we had, but this is the first appearance of Nurse Chapel, who, if you all recall from the first episode, this is Gene Roddenberry's girlfriend.
Oh, so that's why she gets to be in love with Spock. That makes sense.
Yeah.
She gets to confess her love for Spock.
Well, because here's the thing. I think in his mind, Gene Roddenberry is Spock.
Interesting. I would have said he thought he was Kirk, but I could see it.
Let's remember the pilot, though. Pike is much more similar to Spock than he is to Kirk.
True. That is true. Yeah, Kirk is so wildly different from Spock. Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
Now that you said that, I could see it.
We'll get right back to pleasing Jesus. We'll get right back to praising Leonard Nimoy in a moment, but first, a word from another one of our great sponsors.
Oh, hey everyone. Your chronometer must be running backwards because I'm actually editing this episode right now. See, look. I'm literally editing the episode you're watching right now. So everything that you're seeing now is actually happening right now. Not really, but sci-fi. Anyway, I wanted to take a second to tell you about some of the other great podcasts on the Arate Podcast Network. Obviously, you already know about The Final Frontier, but we have quite a few other offerings for you. If you enjoy talking about politics, for example, you can check out the Average Intelligence podcast every week.
I will say racketeering, though, like if she's charged with that, that's a federal crime. She's
she could be charged in the Georgia sense. However, I mean,
make a example of her too.
You could get her on election interference, technically speaking. But
likewise, if you're a pro wrestling fan, Down the Middle's got your fix every other week. If you like Disney, Broadway, or both, you can join Haley every other week with the Part of Your Broadway World podcast. And if you're a 90s horror fan, chances are you're a fan of the Goosebumps book series, television series, and film series. Well, we have a podcast for that too. Every week, hang out with the Goosebumps Crew podcast, and they just nerd out on everything Goosebumps and actually have landed some pretty cool celebrity guests.
We are revisiting The Haunted Mask 1 and 2, arguably some of the best episodes of the Goosebumps 90s TV show. And I'm telling you guys, we got a really, really special guest here today, and that is...
Hi, Catherine Long here.
Hi there, and Catherine played Carly Beth in both episodes.
You want to take a peek behind the curtain in the music industry? Check out Leading the Band. And if you enjoy more pop culture, check out Toon Talk 2.0 every Tuesday.
The name of the podcast is clearly May the 4th. We never say Star Trek. When we have a special Star Trek, I'm all yours. I'm all pointy ears as Spock. I'm all about being a smart ass. I'm really cool. I love Captain Kirk. But this is a Star Wars. You see what is in the back? Look at that.
I do. And I'm sorry, I don't care how many X-Wings you have, none of them stand a chance against the Starship Enterprise.
And you have to check out my co-host Justin's podcast, the Spur of the Moment podcast, for more of your nerdy pop culture fix.
And it's like, did you forget your movie's Batman Returns? The movie that ruined Batman?
And last but definitely not least, check out 2023's Artie Award Podcast of the Year recipient, the Arate Podcast, every month for long, in-depth conversations about interesting stuff with very interesting people. And I'm stoked to announce that in addition to the Final Frontier, we have quite a few more podcasts that are going to be launching later this year. So keep an eye out for that. You can see all the podcasts on the Arate Podcast Pantheon at aratemedia.org and click on podcasts. And now, back to the show.
The next scene is Kirk confronting Spock, right? So my three notes are Spock takes those slaps like a champ, just consistently.
To be fair, it's I don't think they've outright said it yet, but it's implied. It's implied in the Man Trap that Vulcans are significantly stronger than Terrans.
That's my next note, which is Spock must be strong if one slap makes Kirk's mouth bleed, and Spock just takes a bajillion slaps to the face, and he doesn't even react. He just spanks him like they're nothing.
Oh, so which, by the way, for those of you who aren't aware, you may have noticed I said the word Terran. The reason being is that it's technically correct. Human is, in Star Trek, they tend to use humanoid instead of human, but Terran specifically refers to a human being from the planet Earth.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So,
not Earthling?
I mean, that would also be appropriate, but Terran would be Terran would be a species name. And fun fact, because this will surprise no one, I used to speak a little Klingon.
Oh.
And the Klingon word for human is Tarachnan.
I've heard that one before.
Which is a derivation of Terran.
Oh, interesting.
Tarachnan, that's how you say I'm a Terran.
And then my only other note about the scene is that Kirk wants to, and I wish I could remember her name consistently, but I just can't. Which is that Kirk really wants to bang his Yaman, which just makes sense.
This is the second time it's implied, and it's not the last. Yeah, Kirk really wants to bang Yeoman Rand.
It sort of surprised me in this episode because his sights really seemed to be set on Uhura. Like him and Uhura, when they had that moment we mentioned earlier, there seemed to be some tension there.
There is. Oh gosh, I forgot the next episode. Yeah, it's implied in this episode. It's outright stated in the next episode.
Interesting. But yeah, I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. I mean, she's a pretty girl. Yeah, I could see why he would.
See, I guess it depends on what you're into more, because like Uhura's got the brains. Not to say Yeoman Rand is stupid, but
yeah. They definitely seem to be giving her, like, she always just kind of seems to be I don't know how to put it, but she always seems to be at the center of the shenanigans. Like she seems to get victimized the most.
Yeah, I don't remember her being around that much from when I watched it previously, but yeah, she's been in the bulk of the episodes.
Yeah, well, it's like to me when it comes to Star Trek, like the lead characters are obviously Bones, Sulu, Chekhov, Kirk, Spock, and then Uhura. But yeah, I had no clue who Yeoman Rand even is, but she's been in this show a lot. Where I'm like, she's not one of the iconic, in my opinion anyway, not an iconic character.
No, but she's in the thick of it.
A lot, yeah. So that's where my question is always like, when does she just I assume she disappears at a point, like she's not in the whole show. She's not that iconic.
I think she bounces in and out. McCoy studies blood samples from his patients and water from the planet's surface, and finds that the water from the planet possesses a previously undetected complex chain of molecules that affects humanoids like alcohol, depressing the centers of judgment and self-control in the brain, and is transmitted by touch, specifically through perspiration, because it's water.
My question is, and I don't have a note for this, but my question to that would be, I mean, surely you could find a way to like monetize this.
Yeah, you would think. I think you might want to. I think monetization
in a controlled fashion, mind you.
Yeah. Well, it's not like they can go get more though. That's the problem, and you want to get rid of it. I don't know. You would think though, like if you're a really dirty capitalist whore.
Right. But also, is it the whole point of the Star Trek future is that capitalism no longer exists? Like, do they not exist in a post-capitalist society?
They technically do, although I think there's some debate on that because I mean, Star Trek personnel are still paid for like discretionary spending. Like,
interesting.
So I would say Earth of Star Trek's future exists in a state not so much post-capitalism, but post-scarcity, meaning that you no longer have to buy food, but you can as kind of a luxury item because like Benjamin Sisko's father owns a restaurant where he cooks real food. It's not replicated, that kind of stuff.
Because like my understanding of the Star Trek futures was that it was utilitarian. Like that was the whole deal.
I mean, yes, but I mean, people still want entertainment, right? And it still costs money. Like it no longer costs money theoretically, like as far as clothes you need, those can be replicated. Food you need, that can be replicated. Parts you need, that can be replicated. But if you want to eat at a restaurant, and Deep Space Nine does a really good job of illustrating this partially because the Ferengi are capitalists on steroids, which I make the case they're not capitalists, they're corporatists. They're just greedy, like to the point of sin. But like Quarks, people gamble, and you need money to gamble. So theoretically, I mean, it would make sense. A Starfleet employee or officer or personnel, whatever, have to be paid something because their needs are all met. But people still would want, which they're probably paid very little, but discretionary spending is still a thing.
Because not to once again compare it to the Orville, but in the Orville, they exist in a post-capitalist society. Money doesn't exist in their universe. It's all based on reputation and skill. It's not based on money.
And that's Seth MacFarlane's politics coming out a little bit.
Yeah. So I just my politics sort of similarly aligned. So I just think that's interesting that Star Trek does. I always thought that idea of a post-capitalist society, that was a Star Trek thing. I thought that came from Star Trek. So it's interesting to hear that it doesn't.
I mean, it kind of does, because I'm not saying that it's not, but I think people who say that Star Trek is communist are taking it a little too far, because there's still I'm being very precise here. I would make the argument that it's not so much that Star Trek is anti-capitalist or not capitalist. They're just in a post-scarcity society, which would mean, I mean, I guess it's kind of a utopian viewpoint, whereas everybody's basic needs are met. Like, if you need medicine, it's plentiful. If you need food, it's plentiful because it can be replicated. Once the food replicator is invented and can restructure matter into food, starvation is a thing of the past because there's no reason to not feed everyone then because there is literally no scarcity. But after you take care of the needs, people still will have wants, and that will still require money.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a certain amount of sense.
I may or may not have thought about that in philosophical debates with people for too long. I'm like, yeah, but people still want to buy stuff, want to have fun. Like jewelry is still a thing, which actually, fun fact, jewelry is actually a really good example. Look at illustration, because there's been an uptick in lab-grown gemstones, particularly diamonds, and the whole diamond industry as a whole anyway is manufactured scarcity. Because what's De Beers owns, which they don't own as much now, but I think at one point they owned like 80% of the diamond inventory, and now I think it's 60 something. But it's still manufactured scarce. If they were to release all the diamonds into the market, they would become very, very cheap. But now that we have sort of industrialized the lab grown diamonds are chemically identical to diamonds. Like it's not fake. It is a diamond, but they're much cheaper to make. They're much cleaner to make, and they don't exploit, labor in the third or second world. So I'm actually a really big fan of lab grown gemstones. Actually, I don't know if it'll show up, but sorry, we're taking a turn. But I don't know if this will show up, but are you familiar with a gemstone called Alexandrite? Sort of. I recognize the name, but I can't put it to anything. So this is a gemstone that under sunlight it appears green, but under lamplight it appears red. And I don't know if this will show. It's probably going to look like a little bit of both right now, because I have really high temperature. I can see the red in it. Yeah, I have really high temperature LED bulbs in here, so it kind of, that's showing pretty dark, but it's still showing some of the green. Again, you can't see it very well. No, it looks mostly dark to me. But this is a lab-grown Alexandrite. But the thing of it is, and this is why I nerd out on this is lab-grown, because the color is a little bit differently. Natural Alexandrite tends to have a little bit more of an emerald green look, whereas this is a little bit more bluish green. And then the red Alexandrite tends to look a little bit more ruby, although sometimes it's deeper. But this one has more of a fuchsia red. So you can see a difference, but if this were not chemically the same as Alexandrite, it wouldn't like from a chemistry standpoint, it would not change color like this. So that's a very good example. Fun fact, I'm starting to get into jewelry making, and I have a very good source for lab-grown and natural gemstones, which I found by accident.
Interesting.
I bought that's a 1.8 carat alexandrite, which you can't even find. Well, you can, but it's expensive. I looked when I was on my cruise. We heard about a store that had a 3 carat alexandrite stone. Guess how much they wanted for it?
I have no point of reference. I'm gonna guess $1,000.
$157,000.
Yeah, wow.
But he offered to go down to 110,000 for me.
What a deal!
I mean, 3 carat Alexander, that's a big stone. That's super rare. So yeah, sorry about that. But so the lab grown diamond, that's what I'm getting at. Lab grown gemstones would be sort of a thing. So like when you can make them in a laboratory, people still want to buy them though.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah.
So you're not going to give them away for free because it still takes time to make and all that jazz. But
yeah,
it's just significantly cheaper than the natural ones. Actually, there's a great line in Third Rock from the Sun where Dick is looking at an engagement ring and he goes, "For a diamond? Where I'm from, we use the big ones for door stops."
Yeah. Typically, there's a lot of science fiction that are like, diamonds are not that rare, man.
McCoy administers the initial doses to the command crew and allowed them to bring the ship back under control in the nick of time. I kind of thought about it. It's kind of like Speed in a way, the movie Speed, because
kind of. I can see the comparison.
So we get another ripped Shatner shirt though, because it's supposed to be really dramatic, but I laughed at it because McCoy just walks up to Kirk and Kirk's like one step away from being like administer, you know.
The moment where he walks out and then McCoy just like rips off his shirt. Like you couldn't have like just lifted up his shirt like his sleeve a little. Why did he rip his shirt?
He doesn't have to because we see in previous episodes and later that a hypospray goes through clothing.
Okay, then why did he rip his clothes?
I don't know. It was great.
That was my favorite moment where you're right. I did not read that sequence as being dramatic, where he just calmly walked up, stands there, and then McCoy rips his shirt off and then sprays him with it. Like, why did you rip his shirt? I don't understand. It makes no sense.
So, but I'm going to read the synopsis of how they get the ship back because this is great. So Kirk orders Scotty to make a full power restart of the warp engine because if you recall, our Irish friend shut them down completely.
Yes, he did.
It's a very dangerous process that mixes matter and antimatter in a cold state to create a controlled implosion and drive the ship away from the planet. This is suggested by a theory postulating a relationship between time and antimatter, but it has never been attempted before. The restart is successful, propelling the Enterprise at impossible speed away from the planet into a space-time warp that sends the ship back 72 hours in time into the past.
Yeah, so my last two notes are Jake lied to me. There's absolutely time travel in this episode.
Jake forgot.
I mean, they didn't go back very far, but still, there was time travel. They went back like a day and a half, and I was a little disappointed that like it didn't turn out that everyone who died was somehow still alive in this timeline. But like,
well, relativity, right? Time can only affect you if you're still alive.
True.
Well, they are still 3 days older, but relativity's a bitch.
So does that mean they went 3 days in the past? Does that now mean that in this timeline there's now 2 Enterprises, or are they always is it predestined time travel, or are they always destined to go back to that moment and like re-go on, or what like there's no consequences to the time travel explored at the end of this episode?
Well, this is back when time travel, I call it the Back to the Future style of time travel where time is linear. So except later there's an episode where they establish a parallel universe, but that's not really described as time travel in Star Trek. It's described as a parallel universe.
Well, that's my big criticism of the MCU generally, is that they don't differentiate between what is an alternate timeline and what is an alternate universe, because
they're
conceptually speaking, from a science fiction standpoint, they're 2 different ideas.
Well, I know, but the MCU ascribes a multiverse theory, in which case there is no such thing as traveling back in time, because if you're traveling back in time, you're actually just traveling to another universe.
Timeline? Yeah. But they've always been, whereas like this is like, yeah, okay, so they've traveled 3 days back in time. That kind of seems like that would be a big deal. Like, hey, we just discovered time travel.
That is a really big deal. They talk about it. In fact, after they come out of it, Spock comments that they now know a way to travel back in time. And I actually really like Kirk's response.
This does open some intriguing prospects, Captain. Since the formula worked, we can go back in time to any planet, any era.
We may risk it someday, Mr. Spock.
It's very measured, and I always like it. And this is one of the things I appreciate about Star Trek is everybody's morality is always, to a point, always measured. So Kirk actually says, "We may risk it someday, Mr. Spock," but it's implying is like, not now. We've had enough.
Nah.
Let's just let's simmer down. We've already escaped death. Let's.
You would think though, like going forward, that he would take that to high command. I mean, we haven't met high command, but assuming that there's a high command, you'd be like, hey, we should try this again. Because
and I think they implied that they don't imply, but I think they do, because again, all their logs are, sent back to Starfleet. But I actually made a note that said, there's that relativity we've been talking about, kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of, yeah. I was just impressed that there was time travel. I was made a little bit of go, ha! Like I literally slammed my fist out. I was like, I knew there would be.
Well, and the reason I probably didn't remember is because at the time I didn't really understand relativity. Is the fact that it's scientifically theoretical, yes, but it's, as far as I understand it, it's scientifically sound, because what it is they're traveling so fast. Now, the caveat is that technically, if you're a physicist and I'm saying this wrong, correct me, please. The closer you get to traveling to the speed of light, the slower time goes for you, and relatively speaking. So therefore, if you travel faster than the speed of light, you actually travel backward in time. The problem is we've yet to find anything physical that can travel faster than light. We can't even find anything physical that can travel as fast as light. Yeah. But the implication is that the relationship between antimatter and time is what causes that speed to happen. And they talk about warp as like creating what would you call that? Like a space-time bubble around the ship, and that's what travels. So the ship and its occupants don't have to dematerialize into light to travel that quickly. Which is how warp speed, because warp speed is faster than light travel. But that's what I'm saying. That's the problem, because if you're traveling at warp speed, you're technically traveling backwards in time.
Interesting.
But that's why they've come to say it's not necessarily warp speed. It's you're creating pockets in space. So
that's what they don't call it. Don't they just call it warp? Like they never call it warp speed. They just call it warp. At least from what I recall in Next Generation, they only ever call it warp.
I think by the time Next Generation rolls around, they correct that. But I think there's a couple of times. I could be wrong, though.
Because in Star Wars, it's warp speed. Like, very much warp speed.
Well, in Star Wars, it's... Yeah. In Star Wars, it's light speed.
No, not warp speed. Hyperspeed. Hyperspeed in Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a physicist. And if I was, I wouldn't be doing... Actually, if I was, I'd probably still be doing a Star Trek podcast. Just some closing fun facts. This is the only episode of the original series where all major female crew members appear in the same episode. Uhura, Nurse Chapel, and Yeoman Rand.
Interesting. I mean, it certainly seemed like the episode with the most main characters. Like, it didn't feel nearly as segmented this time. It really felt like a group effort.
Yeah.
Also, not a bummer ending this time.
Nope. It's actually quite
a happy ending. I was happy about that.
And there's an episode from Star Trek The Next Generation, The Naked Now, which serves as I said a loose sequel, but it's not really all that loose. The crew of the Enterprise D goes through very much the same ordeal, and this incident is referenced as happening before.
Very interesting.
And
I as we wrap up, I do want to say just as my final thoughts. Yeah, I think this is the best episode so far. Like legit, so far. Like good, like solid performances all around. The story was interesting. The dilemma was interesting.
The tension was there. Leonard Nimoy. Actually, you know what? Leonard Nimoy, George Takei, and William Shatner all brought it.
They really that sequence between Kirk. I mean, we kind of sped over it a little bit, but the sequence between Kirk and Spock, where they're both drugged out of their minds, and he's like, "It can't be done," and they're like, "You tell me it can be done." It's genuinely so good.
William Shatner's performance is kind of overshadowed by Leonard Nimoy's just awesome moment.
I mean,
not to take anything away from it, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like,
as the kids say, they did not have to go that hard,
but they did anyway. I was going to say that's kind of like coming on screen after Daniel Day-Lewis just like kills it.
Yeah, well, my thing with Spock, and the reason why it was so impressive is because Leonard Nimoy hasn't been doing much on the show. He's just kind of been there for me. He hasn't really been putting in the performance. Kirk has really been carrying this show for me for the past few episodes. Kirk and Bones. I love Bones. He is so good.
I was gonna say Bones was carrying the episode for the man trap for sure.
Absolutely, he was. But this episode is really it's Spock and it's kind
of everybody.
Sulu. It's Spock and it's Sulu. They get the like Sulu gets like some great moments. To me, they have the two most Sulu with the freaking rapier, like with shirtless with the rapier, like that and Spock, like they were the highlights for me this week.
It's good shit. And as you alluded to earlier, our red shirt tally is still at 0.
It's at 0.
5
I thought
episodes
we were gonna get
in.
it this week.
5 episodes in, we still have 0 dead red shirts. I mean,
I pop culture has led me to believe it's a common occurrence, and I'm disappointed it is not. Every time I see a red shirt, my notes go to, is this going to be my first? But it's not, and I'm disappointed every week. I leave every week disappointed.
Well, that was The Naked Time. And like you said, I just keep saying it was such a great episode. It was really good.
It was so good. It was so, like, I've been enjoying this, don't get me wrong, but this is the first episode where I'm like legitimately like good shit. Like I'm excited for next week. I am. Yeah. I'm excited for the next episode.
Next week's episode is very good. Next week we're going to be watching and commenting on The Enemy Within, so Spock had his moment, or Leonard Nimoy had his moment for this one. You're going to get to see some fantastic overacting from William Shatner in the next episode.
Love me some William Shatner. I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be fun, but we will see you guys next week on The Final Frontier.
Considering that he's playing 2 versions of the same person, it's actually quite good.
Just so you know, there's a second Kirk out there. Don't give him anything or help him in any significant way. Here's your phaser, evil Kirk!
Apparently, in the original script, this scene and the scene where Scotty shows them the 2 dogs were reversed. So this
that makes so much more sense.
Fairly right. I'm blue again. Wow.
Yeah, it must be a lighting thing.
You know what it probably is now that I'm thinking of it, because that tends to happen at the same time. The sun is going down, so it's a really deep blue sky, and I think that light's coming in.
That makes sense.
The
sun lights behind me like crazy, so I get it.
Well, so maybe I'll just do my Shran impression. That's for you really nerdy Trekkies. Fantastic character actor who plays Shran and the Vorta. I forget the Vorta's name in Deep Space Nine, but he's very good.